Hey there, it's Professor Carthy, and this is Hip Hop Lesson 9. And so this is the course called The History and Evolution of Hip Hop. And so if you don't know, my name is Professor Carthy. I'm going to give you a quick background. I'm an educational or ed tech professional, and I also own a consulting business where I help students get into college, as well as succeed in college and prepare for life after college. And so this class actually started early in my career. Back in the day, I used to be a teacher in Los Angeles, and I taught African American history. And as a result of my students doing well, my reward was to give them a 2-week course in hip hop history. So with coronavirus coming around, I thought to myself, there's a lot of people who listen to hip hop, but don't know the background and history around it. So I thought, why not help out the kids and also parents? And so that's how this course came about. And I've always loved hip hop. So what I want to also do is I want you to meet my student, and she's going to go ahead and introduce herself, tell you what grade she's in, where she's from, and why she wanted to take this course. And then we're going to get started.
Hi, my name is Ava Cat. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, in grade, and I love listening to hip hop. I wanted to learn more about the history of it, like what influenced.
Okay, great. So without further ado, we always get started with our song of the day. And so we're going to go ahead and do that. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And you should be able to see it. And I'm going to go ahead and present. And so I always also have a picture that is historic that relates to hip hop. So this is lesson 9. This is a picture of MC Hammer in Oaktown's 357. And again, because we're concentrating on Northern California history and the emergence of hip hop in Northern California. This is a group that was very popular in Oakland and basically commercialized. So it brought attention to Oakland that we had never had before. So I said we're going to do the song of the day, and we're going to go ahead and get started.
Off easy, I thought you easy. Man, where you boy KCZ at, man? I ain't no telling. Alright, KC. Alright, get up here and sprinkle some of these, man. Lace them up and sing some play, boy. Got it all. Say that you got it all. Been aside, and I was at the REI waiting for this rap game flew out in town. Thought you crazy, but she blues member, Earl Brandon nailed the boy from Vallejo, and every night is automatic. Burn rubber, see my focus in the traffic. What's up, Earl? Happy got your in. My partner Chuck got some bros. I'm always hearing rappers big calling on their song. Like that for real, and you'll never say I'm just 5 straight 20s. TV in the money. Short day been down since the 80s. For the last 8 years, I rode around in a Mercedes, Lexus, trucks, drop. Don't call me by my name, they call me Daddy.
So that is my song of the day, and it is by E40 and has pop-up performances by Too Short and Casey. And I actually did that because of you. So Casey is part of Jodeci. Jodeci was a R&B group, and they're from Charlotte, North Carolina. That's why I had that. So we could marry the California hip hop with R&B from North Carolina. E40 is from Vallejo, and then Too Short, really, he's originally from Los Angeles, but he represents Oakland. And so I wanted to show you some of the biggest artists that were around. So what I'm going to do, oh, I forgot. I have to talk about the elements that were in the hip hop video. And so in that video, We have, of course, rapping. We have E40 rapping. We have also Too Short rapping. We don't have any graffiti. We have dancing. So I won't call it break dancing because we know that in hip hop, people have different, or it's evolved into different things. So in the Bay Area, during that time period, we don't dance necessarily super hard. You know, everybody's just chilling. So that's how we dance back in the day. And then also the street fashion, you know, for that time period, they were considered, you know, fly, dressed up. Of course, you have the swag, the appeal. They have the gold chain, and then he talks about what is so a big part of the Bay Area hip hop is like Mack and pimping, and we'll get to why that is so important to Northern California, or the backdrop for Northern California hip hop. So that street knowledge that they're talking about is having what we call in the Bay Area game. Do you have, do you know how to speak to a woman, to talk to her, you know, to influence her to, you know, be your girlfriend or be your girl or whatever. The street entrepreneurship, again, he's talking about making money so they can get cars. And so that is what's in that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share Ava's video. So let me get to that really quick. Okay, so where did you go? There you are. All right. And then I'll share it with you all in a moment. Ava's, when I pull it up. And
the last thing you should
so right now what you're hearing is commercial,
about
but
right now is
we're
having
gonna
enough
get to the
toilet
video.
paper. Please know we're working around
Okay.
more Charmin. Stay safe.
Do you see it?
I can see like a portion. Oh, now I can see it.
Okay, cool.
Justice stood, and people were behaving like they ought to good. There lived a little boy who was misled by another little boy, and this is what he said. Me and you, son, we're gonna make as robbing old folks and making the day. They did the job, money came with ease. One couldn't stop, it's like he had a disease. He robbed another and another, and a sister and a brother. Tried to rob a man who was a DT undercover. The cop grabbed his arm, he started acting erratic. He said, "Keep still, boy, no need to snap." Punched him in his belly and he gave him a slap. But little did he know the little boy was strapped. The kid pulled out a gun, he said, "What?" The barrel said straight for the cop's kidney. The cop got scared, the kid he starts to figure, I'll do years if I pull this trigger. So he cold dashed and ran around the pop radios into an unbelieving shop. He ran by a tree, there he saw the sister. Shot for the head, he shot back, but he picked up. Looked round good and from expectations, he decided he'd hit for the subway station. But she was coming and he made a left. He was running top speed till he was out of breath. Knocked an old man down and swore he killed him. Then he made his move to an abandoned building. Ran up the stairs up to the top floor. Opened up a door there. Guess who he saw? Dave, the dope fiend shooting dope. Who don't know the meaning of water? So he said, "I need bullets. Hurry up, run." The low light go like this dope machine. He went outside, but there was cops all over. Then he dipped into a car. Raced up the block doing 80s.
Oh my gosh, I love this video. So tell us why you chose it and what are the elements of hip hop.
I chose it because I also love the video. I think it's like a really funny video as well. And the elements, there's like street fashion, DJing, I think, There wasn't much dance in it, and I think it was kind of knowledge because of how, like, when the guys kind of steal, like, the loot, I think, kind of like just how that exchange and stuff.
Yes, you are correct. And let me see if I'm going to mute this and I'll go back so I can show you something. So this right here is the popular dance back then. So you see how they're doing that? So everyone did that dance. So again, that was a popular dance. You did point out the street fashion. But what I absolutely love about this in terms of the elements of history, hip hop, is the rapping, emceeing. He's telling a story. So even if you didn't have the video, the way that he raps and tells the story, you can picture in your head. And I love this video because it matches what he's saying. And if you can see, when I was playing the video, I still remember all the words because that's what we used to sing all the time. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and get started. I am gonna move it back to our presentation in our class. So very good. And our agenda, we did our intros, we had our song of the day. We're gonna do a pest analysis of California, and then we're gonna wrap up. So today is a little bit different. We're not necessarily gonna go into all the songs, but you're gonna learn the main components, not all, the main components, which really were the backdrop of the emergence of hip hop in Northern California. And there's two particular cities that were crucial. So it first started, hip hop first started in Oakland, California, in Northern California, and then it emerged out of Vallejo. And you'll see why later. So, but before we do that, we always have at least a question on the last lesson so that we can see that you retain some knowledge. So what year did the first rap songs come out of California? Is it A, 1971, B, 1976, C, 1981, or D, 1988?
I think it's C, 1981.
Ding, 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 ding. And she got the right answer. Do you remember the rappers' names, the two that came out in 1981?
Yes, that's Disco Daddy on the screen. And then the other one was Motorcycle Mike.
Look at you. Hey, you get a prize. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and then we're going to start going into the history. So once again, if you haven't joined us before, we're doing a past analysis of California history so we can see what the backdrop of California history was when hip hop emerged, because we all know that the things that are going on in our society influence rappers and the music industry. So a pest analysis, we look at the political landscape, the economic landscape, the social landscape, and the technological advancements that existed during that time period. So the biggest influence, because we stated before that hip hop was started by Black folks, okay? So when we're talking about the emergence of hip hop in Northern California, you have to look at Black history. So there was a great migration, like we know from the other lesson, and that took place from 1910 to approximately 1970. There were two waves. The first wave was 1910 to 1940, and then the second wave was 1940 to approximately 1970s. So in this case, we have people that are moving from Louisiana and Texas in particular to Los Angeles and to the Bay Area. So when I say the Bay Area, I'm talking about San Francisco, Oakland, Vallejo, and things of that nature. And then we also have to understand that it wasn't just Black migration that was going on. In particular, in the 80s, we had a lot of white flight to the suburbs. And then we also have a lot of migration that is coming from Southeast Asia, because a lot of people are refugees running away from wars that are occurring. You have the Vietnam War that's going on, that's affecting Cambodia. So that we have Cambodian refugees in the Bay Area. In California, we have wars that are going on in Central and South America. So we have Latinos coming from those places. So you have Nicaraguans because of the Sandinista movement. You have your Belizeans, you have Mexicans, you have all kinds of Latin American people. So you don't want to just think, when you think about California, it's not just Mexicans. It's a lot of different types of Latinos that exist. And then we also, like we said, we have Southeast Asians that are a variety. The Vietnamese, definitely Filipinos were a large part of the Bay Area. So we will see that too. And just so you can get a picture of how big the migration is, I'm showing you a picture of my sister and I think this is the late 70s, almost 79, early 80s. And so this is me, and this is my sister May, and this is my mom in the back and my aunt, and this is my cousin. My cousin, his dad was from the Caribbean, and so he's Asian and Black too, and this is my sister. And I don't know who this lady is, but she's a friend. So I just wanted to show you the mixture that existed in California. So when people were moving from, especially with the Great Migration, they were coming for jobs. So when you think about economics, and when you eventually take an economics course or history, it's called the push and pull kind of thing. And that means that man is an economic being. I remember one of my professors at Spelman College, she said, man is an economic being. They all do things for economic reasons. I was like, no, that's not true. People do things because they believe in it and because they want to and they want to help people. And she was like, no, let me show you. So man is an economic being. I started to believe her after she said that. When she was talking about man, she was talking about humankind. People do things because they have to survive. They have to earn a living. They have to have food, shelter, and clothing. So a lot of the decisions that people make and where they live are based on the push and pull factors of society. And the push and pull factors of society were, in the South, there weren't that many jobs that weren't agricultural based. So it was hard to make a living and take care of your family. As a result, we have a great migration of people trying to get opportunities and not face as much discrimination in places like New York, Chicago, Detroit, Oakland, San Francisco, Los Angeles. And so here we have, in particular with the Great Migration, a lot of Black folks got jobs in military facilities. And so this is one of the biggest employers in the Bay Area, the Naval Air Station at Alameda. And so when I say a Naval Air Station, that had airplanes, they had ships, they had everything. And so my father worked there for 21 years. And we'll find out later too, my dad was in charge of the missile, he was a supervisor for the missiles. So of course we couldn't go because there were missiles in the missile building. But we'll look at that later on and how there's wars going on and all of this stuff has to be sent out overseas to help out in the Vietnam War. Okay, so the Naval Air Station was a big employer of the Bay Area. And then we also have in Vallejo, because I wanted to show you the connection. In Vallejo, you have the shipyards. There again, there's a base where they fix the ships that go out to sea. So not only did my father work at the Naval Air Station in Alameda, he was also part of the Navy on weekends. And so he did that for, I don't know how many years. So he was a chief in the Navy. And so you have these big, I don't know what you call them, but they were like warships, and they were at least like, they were so large, you know, you've probably seen them on TV, with at least 2,000 to 4,000 people could fit on them. And so, you know, ships, they get leaks, they break and things of that nature. So Vallejo was the shipyard area where they got fixed. These two naval stations or naval properties no longer, I mean, they sit, but they were closed in 93, they were closed. So all of these bases are closed and it's just empty right now. A big thing in the Bay Area that occurred was around 64 to 65, you have the free speech movement that occurred at UC Berkeley. And this is critical because a lot of people, when you think about college activism and speaking out against things that are not fair and just, people associate that with the free speech movement and UC Berkeley. So I'm going to show you a video. And this is actually one of the places, I used to hang out at UC Berkeley, not inside the campus, but outside, because I always thought of it as, oh, these people are progressive. They speak out for what they believe in. So I wanted to be around that. So we're going to hear about the free speech movement.
The free speech movement was about students having the right to pass out literature, raise money, and recruit members to participate in social and political action on behalf of causes that they believed in. So they had arrested him and brought a police car on campus to carry him away. And everybody sat down around the car. And then over the next 30 hours, the protest grew and grew. So there was several thousand people sitting around the car. And it was that event that really galvanized the campus. And people started asking, well, I believe in all these things too. Why aren't I getting involved in this? Why am I not standing up for justice? So on December 2nd, we moved into Sproul Hall. We did expect to get arrested. We definitely expected to get arrested. And we were surprised because we sat there and we sat there and we sat there and nobody came. But around 3 in the morning, we got word that the police had massed and were going to come in. It was outrageous to the faculty that the students had been arrested and that the police had been brought on campus. So at that point, the faculty really started organizing and eventually came out with a strong statement of support for the students. What it did immediately was create a space in the Bay Area for the anti-Vietnam War protests. I think what it did nationally was it awakened students all over the country to a sense of themselves as political actors, that they could and should get involved in the major issues of the day.
So that was the free speech movement. And if we think about that in terms of history, you have to remember, like, the Brown versus Board of Education happened in 1954, where it said that Black people could go to any school they wanted and could not necessarily be segregated. So the free speech movement, of course, was influenced by the civil rights movement. And you have to remember the Great Migration. Black people were moving because they had those opportunities to go to different schools, go to different places, and live in different areas. So if we think about, first, if we go back and we think about the Great Migration, what category would we put that in terms of the pest?
The Great Migration, I think it could be political or social.
And explain.
Political, it's like everyone, kind of for both, the reason could be that everyone's getting involved in it and helping each other out to, like, stand up.
Okay, that's true. And then we also have, like you said, the what was the other one you said it could be?
Social. I said political and social.
Okay. And why did you say social?
Kind of like how the community comes together to help with this.
Okay, and that's true. And then remember, it doesn't have to just be in one category. It could be in many. It could be in all. It depends on, you just have to be able to explain it. So the other part of it is, remember, we talked about the push and pull factors. So the Great Migration occurred because of economics, the ability for one to provide for their family. So the economic factor helped spur part of the Great Migration. And then we have the free speech movement. If we look at the free speech movement, where would it fall in terms of a category? Would it be political, economic, social, or technological?
I think it could be social as well.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
And give me the reason why.
Because, like, in the video, everyone was, like, around the car to do, like, the protest. So I guess kind of like for the Great Migration, people are coming together socially.
Okay. And then, like you said, all they were fighting for at first was the right to pass out pamphlets and support different things that they wanted to. And after the police were brought in, they were like, this is ridiculous. We're on a college campus. Why are police coming here to take us to jail because we want to share information? Like, don't we have the freedom of speech? And so as a result, people were being taken away by the police. And you have to also understand the police department in the Bay Area was made up of largely white Southern migrants to the Bay Area. So even though Black folks were leaving, white folks also left. But again, when you're coming from the South to the West Coast, you bring those attitudes that you had before. You don't automatically just, I don't look down on Black people. You still might look down on them. Or I don't look, I don't turn my nose to people who are consider themselves elite. So you have still some of those remnants of Southern culture being brought to the West Coast, even though you're in a different spot. So there was a lot of tension between the police and different communities. And in this case, this is the police really dealing with the students. And what was good about this is that the professors came to support the students. So if the professors had not come to support the students, they probably would have not had a good outcome. And again, this spurred the free speech movement, like she said, became like part of the anti-Vietnam protest era, okay? And so that was in 1964 and 1965. So the biggest thing that was going on in Oakland was we have the Black Panther Party that was started in 1966. It was started by this guy named Huey P. Newton and also Bobby Seale. And so these two were Southerners originally. Their parents moved to Oakland for better opportunities. Bobby Seale was from Texas, and Huey P. Newton was from Monroe, Louisiana. So again, they have Southern culture, but they also want new things. And these two actually met at a community college in Oakland. And so what they were first originally fighting for is they were fighting for the right to have an African-American, or they didn't call it Afro-American back then, they called it, Negro or possibly Afro-American history course at their community college. So that's how those two came together. And then they started realizing that there were things going on in the community, especially with the tension between the police and the Black community. So they wanted to help out, and that's how that organization came to part. One of the things that they have that a lot of people don't talk about is that they had a 10-point platform, and let me tell you some of the things that they were fighting for. When I say fighting for, they were demanding, okay? So, okay, let me read off those things for you. So when you say a 10-point, the 10-point platform, this is the things that they believe that Black people should have. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and read off some of the things, and I hope you can hear me. So this is the Black Panther Party 10-point platform. So all of their activities were surrounding this. We want freedom. We want freedom or power to determine our destiny for our Black community. We want full employment for our people. We want an end to the robbery by the white man of our Black community. We want decent housing, fit for shelter for human beings. We want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society. We want education that teaches us our true history and our role in present day society. We want all Black men to be exempt from military service. We want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of Black people. We want freedom for all Black men held in federal, state, county, and city prisons. We want all Black people, when brought to trial, to be tried in a court by a jury of their peers or people from their Black community as defined by the Constitution of the United States. We want land. We want bread. We want housing. We want education. We want clothing. We want justice. We want peace. So when you heard those things about the 10-point platform, what did you think?
I think that they really were like trying to the rights of other African Americans.
Okay, and so that's true. And do you know, like, this stuff wasn't just coming up with it. They, like I said, they met at a college campus, they studied history, and they studied revolutions all over the world. So one of the things that they required their members to do is they had to read, you know, you just be a member, but they wanted you to read the Red Book by Mao Zedong, which was the, it's like a communist manifesto. Of course, they wanted you to read the Karl Marx Communist Manifesto, and of course, about Black history. So those were the things. It's basically, if you think about it, they just wanted the basic rights of just living a decent life: food, shelter, clothing, the right to be able to, you know, work and to have a good education. So let's hear it from them and see what they say about it. So we're going to go to the next slide. Oh, and I want to tell you, because they were trying to help out the community, they didn't just stick to Oakland, California. Their movement grew so big and people believed in what they were doing. They had like what do you call it? Chapters in different cities and big cities. So they had a chapter in Los Angeles. They had a chapter in Chicago. They had a chapter in, like, say, New York. They had a chapter in Baltimore. So the Black Panther Party it was started in Oakland, but they had chapters in America and also eventually in the world, like in Africa and the Caribbean. Okay. We're gonna go ahead and show you. So this is a picture of, real quick. Well, no, let me play this so you can hear it, and then I'm going to show you what this picture is and why it says what it says. So right here, this lady with a big afro, her name is Kathleen Cleaver. So you know, and she was part of the Black Panther Party. She actually lives in Atlanta and teaches at Emory University. Oh, that's not the one. Wait, is it? Hold on one second. Okay, yeah. Sorry.
Okay. It's okay.
America, Black people are treated very much as the Vietnamese people or any other colonized people, because we're brutalized. The police in our community occupy our area, our community, as a foreign troop occupies territory. And the police are there not to, in our community, not to promote our welfare or for our security and our safety, but they're there to contain us, to brutalize and murder us. Because they have their orders to do so. And just as the soldiers in Vietnam have their orders to destroy the Vietnamese people, the police in our community couldn't possibly be there to protect our property because we own no property. They couldn't possibly be there to see that we receive the due process of law for the simple reason that the police themselves deny us the due process of law. And so it's very apparent that the police are only in our community, not for our security, but the security of the business owners in the community, and also to see that the status quo is kept intact.
People aren't here for that yet. They're not really aware of it. They know some shit's going on in this country somewhere. But a lot of people out there don't know where it's at. They think Black people doing it. That all those riots are causing my life to be miserable in all areas, you know. And they really haven't focused in on the fact that it's the pigs and their mentors, the people who control the pigs, the power structure, the bald-headed businessmen at the Chamber of Commerce. See, they're not turned on to that power structure. You just know that life is becoming increasingly miserable for everybody. But when they find out who it is that's causing trouble, and who it is that's making life miserable, who it is responsible for all their sons being murdered in Vietnam, when they get tuned into that, then they're all going to be just like the Panthers, because this is what we're tuned into. We see what's going on, and it's just a terrible situation. More and more people are turning on to that. So I think that they're going to do the dog right here in Babylon.
When we first started, we had a police alert patrol, and we would patrol the community. If we saw the police brutalizing anyone, we put an end to this. Usually, the police would brutalize anyone if we were on hand, if we were armed. And if the police arrested the individual, we'd follow him to the jail and bail the individual out, whether he was a Panther or not. And we would gain many recruits like this. So therefore, the community started to say that, well, these people are really concerned.
Okay, so hold on 1 second. I want to make sure that this is recording. It is. I'm going to go back. So if we think about what you saw, could you hear what they were talking about? What were some of the things that they did?
I heard the police treated people unfairly.
Okay.
What you meant?
That's true. And so what did they do to try to make sure that the police wouldn't treat people unfairly?
They set up like protests and stuff.
Okay. So it wasn't necessarily a protest. What they did was they kind of had patrols, and they were armed because it was legal to be armed and you could have, your guns. So they would train their members, and how to use a gun. And they believed that if you got shot at, you shoot back. And so in this case, if the police were doing something wrong, they made sure that they followed the rules too. So you could stand back and you could observe as a community citizen. So if anyone, especially in the Black community, got arrested, they would stand by armed and make sure everything was going all right. Like the people didn't get beat or things of that nature. And then they would follow the cop car to the jail to make sure that those people who were being arrested were still being treated fairly, and then they would bail them out. So they would have a kind of like, it wasn't a protest, but it was a police patrol where they monitored the police to make sure that they upheld what they were supposed to do and didn't treat people wrong. So one of the crazy, it's the slang that they used during that, or Black vernacular during that time. They referred to police as pigs. So you'll hear that a lot during that time period. They would always say the pigs. And eventually in the 1980s and 90s, we didn't call them pigs. Everybody used to call them the popos. So whenever we'd hear the police come, or you'd hear sirens or whatever, we'd be like, oh, here comes the popo. I don't know if you heard of that before. So that's what we call them in California. And so that right there scared a lot of people, especially white folks, because to see Black men and Black people having guns, walking around, being willing to protect themselves, and if something went down, being willing to shoot back, they didn't like that. So the government actually started a program, because they were growing so large across America, to tear down that organization. It was called the COINTELPRO. The COINTELPRO. And they labeled the Black Panther Party the single biggest threat to American society. And so what they did was they would send fake letters to the organization from other members who were, in jail, to try to cause dissension. Okay. And then they also, again, tried to arrest as many of the Black Panthers as they could, especially the leaders, because if you don't have your leaders as part of your organization, what happens to the organization?
It can't thrive because of the
thrive. Right. Okay. So that's one of the biggest things I want you to know. So the COINTELPRO, it was run by the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover was the head of the FBI, And he said, this is the single biggest threat to American society. Why? Because they were afraid of Black people rising up, because you have to understand the Black Panther Party, they weren't just for Black people. They actually united with other organizations, like say the Brown Berets. And the Brown Berets were similar to the Black Panther Party, but they were started by Chicanos. And then Chicano is a word that we used to use in California for Mexican. So the Brown Berets were similar to the Black Panther Party, and they we organized with them. We also organized with other Asian groups that were being oppressed. You have other just groups all throughout America that we organized with. So Black Panther Party was seen as a threat because they were gaining so much popularity and members, and people willing to organize with them. And Hollywood stars and really wealthy people actually started funding or sending money to the Black Panther Party to bail people out to support the organization. So let me play this next thing for you. Oh, that was not the one. We'll go to the next one. So here's the next thing you need to know. So in that, you see that J. Edgar Hoover said they were the single biggest threat. He wanted to just break them apart. But also, some of the misnomers about the Black Panther Party is that the majority of members were males. They weren't. The majority of members of the Black Panther Party were women. They also did things that related to the 10-point platform. Remember we said about they wanted to make sure that people were fed, had a good education. So they had actually the first free breakfast program that was started in 1969 to help feed kids prior to actually going to school, so that they would be able to learn. Because if you have a hungry kid, you can't necessarily learn. And as a result of that program, they would feed like 20,000 people, and it got so popular that the United States Department of Education and other school districts actually started adopting it. So that's why you see now the free and reduced lunch program and the breakfast program. It was because of the Black Panther Party being successful at that. During that time period, oh, I have to go back to this picture. The reason why you see this picture, this is in the late, I'd say, it could be late 70s, early 80s. It says Free Huey. It says Free Huey because they arrested him and he went to jail, and he got arrested a lot of times, okay? And so what they wanted to make sure was that their leader or leaders were out so they could lead the party. When I was young, I didn't know what all that meant, and I used to go to an after-school program, and I would see all over the world. I'd see like a thing with a black beret and like a gun held, and it would say Free Huey. And I remember asking my stepmother about it, and you know, she didn't really go into it. She was just like, "You just don't need to know about it." I was like, "Oh, okay." So I went to school with a lot of people who were Black Panther kids. And you'll find out too that Tupac's mom was a Black Panther Party member. So he grew up knowing about that stuff. And so actually when your mom and I were in school, his mother came to Clark Atlanta to speak, and she talked about her time in the Black Panther Party, and he was in the back, and he came around. He was talking about how she taught him how to protect himself and also know his rights. During this time period, Blaxploitation films were really, really popular. And so I'm going to go ahead and play this so you understand what this means.
In the late 1960s, Hollywood was in trouble. The white middle class, their biggest audience, was emigrating to new suburbs, leaving cinemas in city centres with declining revenues and films without viewers. It would be years before multiplexes redefined the cinema landscape in the States. Meanwhile, black working class people, the majority of city dwellers, were celebrating the passing of the Civil Rights Act, but were left adrift by the respectability politics of the black middle class, and felt without representation. This was the situation facing Melvin Van Peebles, a black filmmaker who felt that he could make a film that accurately represented the experiences of the black working class.
I got tired of seeing movies where, oh, they're gonna do the lights now tonight. They're sending so-and-so to the last mile. Always a brother with extra Vaseline hands the ball. I just got tired of seeing that. So God, do it yourself.
The low-budget movie, which he directed, scripted, scored, and edited, as well as playing the lead role in, was Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song. Premiering in just 2 cinemas, it eventually made over $10 million. It follows the story of Sweet Sweetback, a young black man, from his first encounter with a prostitute at age 9 to his escape from white police after being framed for a murder. The reception from the black community, in particular the Black Panthers, was enthusiastic. A touchstone and codifier of Blaxploitation, Sweet Sweetback is a stylish film with a kick-ass score, characterful performances, and poppy visuals. But it's hard to watch now, with significant amounts of rape perpetrated by and against the protagonist and glorified crime and violence throughout. In that sense, it's a perfect example of everything wrong and right about the genre. In the same year, Shaft provided a more mainstream Blaxploitation take, showing that black audiences were a force to be reckoned with. Here you can see clear signs of the visual aspects of Blaxploitation, liberal use of zooms, an almost sepia colour palette, and grainy film, resulting both from the cheap production values and the desire by directors to make the films lively and full of movement. Blaxploitation became a full-on craze, launching the careers of some prominent black actors like Fred Williamson and Pam Grier. Predominantly focused on crime, the Blaxploitation style was applied to other genres, like horror, kung fu, and westerns. By the mid-1970s, controversy from more conservative black activists and formulaic knockoffs led to waning enthusiasm for Blaxploitation films. While Hollywood had been happy to make money out of black audiences, it's clear that Blaxploitation was seen as a fad, and sadly, many of the talented people working on these films didn't work again for years, until a resurgence in popularity in the 1990s, which coincided with the birth of new black realism, including movies like Boys in the Hood. These pictures were created by the first generation of black filmmakers who grew up with Blaxploitation, and with their stylish visual flourishes, crime narratives, and charismatic performances, evoked Blaxploitation while focusing on more grounded stories. From the energy of these movies, and from the innovation and subversive spirit of Blaxploitation, we can draw hope that representation behind and in front of the camera will continue to improve. Hope you enjoy watching Blaxploitation films. If you choose to buy any, you can help fund out.
So the Blaxploitation films, like I stated before, is white folks were leaving the cities. So you know what? There's cinemas, there's movie theaters. How do you attract the black audience that is there? And that's where the Blaxploitation films came in. They were for black people, in particular, the working class black people, okay? So it talked about in this film, the middle class, middle class respectability politics. So middle class black folks didn't really necessarily always agree with working class black folks and how they did things or things of that nature. You'll always see that everywhere throughout the country, even especially in Oakland. You have a divide between the middle class black people as well as the working class, and even the sections of town. So Oakland was more working class. San Francisco was considered, the rich people lived there, but they also had a black working class section. In Oakland, the middle class section of Oakland, where a lot of doctors, lawyers, all those kind of things, they lived in Trestle Glen, which was around the lake, which was, again, there was a divide. So it was grainy, rough in Oakland, but we had a sense of community because we had those southern roots. So mostly everybody has family from Louisiana and Texas in California, especially in Oakland and Vallejo. So Blaxploitation is very important. I'm gonna play a trailer for you. I did not understand when we start listening, and I'll share you the lyrics of the early hip hop in Oakland and then the Bay Area and why they talk. I didn't understand, like, why do they always talk about I'm a Mack, I'm a pimp? And it's because of this Blaxploitation movie that came out, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, and then we'll wrap up, okay?
Okay.
Pimp is only as good as his product. Product is women. You got to go out there and you got to get the best ones you can find.
It's just a job.
You got to work them broads like nobody's ever worked them before.
I don't give a shit about what happened. Get me my money. These are my people out here, man. We got a whole thing out here.
They had it together. He had a master plan. He knew what he wanted, and the only way he could get it was cash.
They're gonna have to rewrite the Mack and Gabe book, you know, because I'm gonna be the new king. When you made our job interesting. You imagine that self-righteous son of a bitch trying to make this neighborhood safe for people to walk around in. You ain't no man. Being rich and black means something, man. You keep doing that, we're gonna be broke.
We're getting too big. The word has come down. It's not healthy to get too big. Listen to me.
Yeah, nigga, you wanna die? I feel spectacular. I feel up.
So the Mack was a Blaxploitation film, but specifically it was about a guy who went to jail and then who had served time for 5 years and who got out, and then he decided he wanted to be the biggest pimp and then become really rich off of that. But he didn't realize how dangerous it was during that time period, and as a result he got ran out of the town. This is, they say it's supposedly based on a true story, and the federal prison that's in Northern California, that if you do something bad, you know, during that time period with drugs, whatever, you know, you went to this place, the federal place that was called San Quentin. So San Quentin, you'll even hear rap songs out of the Bay Area in the 80s that just talk about San Quentin or going to jail. So San Quentin, this, you know, after the guy came out, like I said, he wanted to become wealthy, and so he figured the best way to become wealthy was become a pimp. And so in order to become a pimp, you have to be able to use psychology to get women to do what you want, to make money off of them and have them work for you and have, you know, prostitute basically. Like I said before, I always wondered, like, I know like Too Short was considered the godfather of rap, but I didn't understand like why he would always talk about sexual exploits or having game or being the Mack. It was based off of this. So the reason why the Bay Area rappers hold this so dear is in 1973, this Blaxploitation film was made, and it was filmed in Oakland. And here's a little thing that a lot of people don't know. The Black Panther Party did not like anything that exploited Black folks. You know, so if you're making a movie about pimping, is this the kind of stuff that we want to have in our community? No. So you know what they would do during the taping of the Mack? They would actually, Black Panther Party members would throw rocks, bottles during the filming of it to make it really difficult for them to film. And so what they did was they were like, okay, so they made an agreement with the Black Panther Party to not do this. And they said, you know, after we make this movie or while we're making this movie, we'll give you money to help with your programs. And so the money that was made off of the Mack actually helped the free breakfast program. So it ended up becoming a way for the Black Panther Party to get what they needed out of it. Again, the other part of this film that I think talks about Oakland history is that you have that pimping thing, right? So he comes back home, he's trying to talk to his family member, but his family member doesn't want to get involved in pimping because he is a Black nationalist. He believes in the things that the Black Panther Party believe in. Like, he believes in, you know, not doing anything to exploit Black people. You do things to help Black people. So that's our history today of Northern California. And next week I'll go into a couple more historical things about Northern California, and we'll start looking at the songs that come out. One of the two movies that I think you should watch if you want to, this one definitely if you want to, but make sure your parents are there. Of course, it has explicit language. They talk about, you know, there's a lot of violence, rape, and all that kind of stuff, but they don't actually show the scenes of it. But you would understand, even Southern hip hop, a lot of them use that Mack type game lyrics, so you'll understand that why. And then the other thing is Boys in the Hood. You watch Boys in the Hood, yeah, I mean, you should be fine. You could probably watch that by yourself. But Boys in the Hood is another classic that will help you understand Los Angeles hip hop and Los Angeles society when we start talking about that. So that's our class for the day. Do you have any questions before we adjourn?
Yes, I have one question. The first free program started in?
I think it was, I could have sworn it was like in the late 60s, 1969.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no problem. You have a great day, and I'll see you in the next class.
Okay, bye.
Bye.